Hi, and welcome to episode 18 of my series about the Pyara region, a fakemon region inspired by Pakistan. So far, we've covered the Pokemon that call Pyara home, but there's more to a region than just the beasts and creatures. For one, since Gen 6, each region has had a special feature that defines the region, its storytelling, and the competitive metagame. These battle gimmicks have provided new opportunities for fakemon creators, but also new challenges, as a bunch of artists now have to think about things like game design. For my previous region, Ormate, I tackled the creative conundrum of battle gimmicks by not engaging with it at all. But for Pyara, I thought I'd at least give it a go. If I'm in for a penny, I'm in for a pound. Before I show you what I came up with, I thought I'd show you the process I took to get there, evaluating the pros and cons of previous battle gimmicks to come up with something new. I'm also hoping that this video can be something other fakemon creators can use as a resource when coming up with battle gimmicks of their own. Or with Pokémon Winds and Waves announced for next year, a battle gimmick retrospective could help with speculating on whatever gimmick Gen 10 is going to throw at us. I think the journey is important to appreciate the destination here, but if you just want to see what I came up with, you can head to this timestamp. You're still here? Excellent! I knew you were cool. Much cooler than those nerds who skipped to the end. Let's have some fun, starting with the first of the battle gimmicks. Mega Evolution is conceptually quite simple. If your Pokemon is holding its appropriate Mega Stone, then once per battle you can Mega Evolve it, adding 100 points to its base stats and sometimes giving a new ability or type. Mega Evolution is probably the most popular battle gimmick, and that's for one big reason. Presentationally, it's really cool. You press a big button and your Pokemon goes through a big flashy transformation that is suddenly way stronger. That's rad. In theory, it's also a great way to breathe new life into underused mods, giving them new options and the stats to finally play in the big leagues. The designs are really fun too, taking the base Pokemon's core concept and visuals and cranking them up to 11 in some really creative ways. Narratively, there's also a lot of appeal in the concept of forging a best friend bond with your Pokemon to help it transcend its physical limitations. It's very anime, very tokusatsu. However, as cool as Mega Evolution is, it was Game Freak's first stab at battle gimmicks. There are a few flaws with the concept as a result. The first is maybe a little obvious. Since each Mega Evolution is a bespoke design, made for individual species, if your fave didn't get a Mega, you can't enjoy the gimmick. If you wanted to make the most of Mega Evolution, and you definitely did if you wanted to get anywhere competitively, you had to pick from one of 30 Megas in X and Y, or 48 in ORAS. Mega Evolution also uses up an item slot. If you wanted a Pokemon to Mega Evolve, you had to commit before you even started a match, and build your team around that Mega to make sure you weren't wasting it. Better hope that you get more out of that Mega than you might have with one of the many useful items, and that your opponent wasn't bringing a Mega that counters yours. Another problem is that 100 extra stats go farther for some Pokemon than others. Beedrill, for example, is a definition of an early game garbage mon, designed to be useful when you're starting out, but quickly falls off to be replaced by better mons. A noble and necessary job for sure, but not a particularly glamorous one. But here comes its Mega to save the day, sending its base stat total from 395 to 495. Wow, that's about as strong as... Well, it's nothing to sneeze at for sure, but those stats can only get Beedrill just about on the level of your average pretty alright Pokemon, whereas Pokemon that are already strong can just get even stronger. It's equality, not equity. Rather than giving underused mons the ability to take a swing at the big dogs, all Mega Evolution really did was give them another avenue to be humiliated. This also means what I said earlier. You had to pick from one of 30 Megas in X and Y, or 48 in ORAS. It isn't entirely true. The pool of Mega Pokemon actually worth investing in is in fact even lower. Finally, something that bums me out about Mega Evolutions is that they're reserved for Pokemon that can't evolve any further. This means that every single stage or two-stage Pokemon that has a Mega won't ever receive a cross-gen evolution, even if they're in a generation that doesn't have Megas. There are loopholes that, say, an enterprising fakemon artist might exploit to give these mons evolutions, but Game Freak is never going to exploit them, so now there are tons of Pokemon that could have really benefited from getting an actual evolution that won't, because it's an arbitrary world-building decision. That sucks! So Megas then. An ambitious but flawed concept that nevertheless shows how far the rule of cool can take you. That's something to keep in mind while working on our gimmick. But for now, let's move on to the next gimmick. Pokémon Sun and Moon introduced Z moves. If a Pokemon is holding an appropriate Z crystal, Once per battle, it can power up one of its moves that corresponds to the type of Z crystal it holds. For example, if a lowland Persian holds a Darkinium Z, it can turn any of its dark type moves into a Z move. This works for attacking moves and status moves. Continuing the example of a lowland Persian, it can either power up its attacking dark type move into Black Hole Eclipse, or power up a status move to give it an extra effect, like Z Parting Shot, which fully heals a Pokemon to get switched in, top of its regular effect. Certain Pokemon also have special Z crystals that power up one specific move into a signature Z move. For example, Incineroar can use the Incinium Z to turn Darkest Lariat into Malicious Moon Assault. First off, the good. I think Z crystals and Z moves have the best narrative integration of all the battle gimmicks. The idea of Z power, of achieving your full potential through the bonds you share with your Pokemon, is woven really well into the story arcs of Alola's wonderful cast of characters, and the process of collecting Z crystals is directly tied to your story progression, making it feel extra special when you get a Z crystal. The Z ring, or Z power ring in the Ultra games, is also the most tokusatsu of all the battle gimmick accessories, and I love it. Look, you put a little trinket in and you do a pose. There's a different pose for each type of move, including the signature ones. They even made a DX roleplay toy version of it that lights up along with the game. That rules! I also really appreciate how much more accessible Z moves are than Megas. Rather than being limited to a specific group of mons, every Pokemon could use Z moves, and they could use them defensively as well as offensively. That opens up the potential of Z moves loads, and gives even more underused mons an extra fighting chance. However, even I, the #1 Alola enjoyer of all time, must concede that Z moves had problems. First off, Z moves had a hard time following up from Mega Evolutions presentationally. As I said, Megas had the rule of cool on their sides, and they had it in spades. Compared to an entire flashy new evolution, an extra move isn't exactly setting the world on fire. Unless it's Inferno Overdrive. Megas also had the benefit of a relatively quick transformation animation, while Z moves take a whole calendar year to play out. While the bespoke animations for the signature moves are great fun, the increased availability of Z moves also meant a lot of the animations had to be one size fits all, which resulted in, well, the Twinkle Tackle animation is infamous for a reason. The fact that it's just the one move, though it is a flashy one, also made Z moves less satisfying to use, which is important for something as metagame defining as a battle gimmick. Megas had problems, sure, but the form change stuck around, which meant you benefited from it longer. Even if you fired off a game-changing Z move at just the right time, that dopamine hit only lasts the one turn. Presentation issues aside, Z moves also have problems from a gameplay perspective. Much like Megas, they take up an item slot, which seems like a bit of a raw trade-off for the sake of one very powerful move. And it can be very easy to waste that move too. If your opponent switches into a mon that resists or immune to your Z move, that's it. That's your one ace in the hole gone. If your opponent has Pokemon that counter your Z move Pokemon and you can't bring it into battle, you lose that power. If your Z move Pokemon gets knocked out before it can use its Z move, you're in trouble. The power that Z moves represented also made them really hard to play defensively against, be that a really strong attacking move or a hideously busted Z-powered setup move, making the experience of having and trying to predict around Z moves more stressful than fun. So, Z moves. A few steps forward, but a few steps back. Game Freak was clearly trying to make battle gimmicks more accessible, but lost a lot of the pizzazz Megas had in the process. Still, we can learn from Z moves. Having the gimmick be flexible and open to all Pokemon is a great idea. Also, weaving the gimmick into the story and character arcs of the region can help it feel more special and personal. You can also learn from the gimmick's shortcoming. Excitement of activating the gimmick needs to last more than a single turn to be truly satisfying, and the power it provides can't be so all-encompassing that it makes the game more anxiety-inducing than enjoyable. Next up, we have...
Oh, I know what it is. You're the biggest man in the world now.
Pokemon Sword and Shield introduced Dynamax. Once per battle, any Pokemon on your team can Dynamax, getting really big for 3 turns. This doubles its HP, and turns all its moves into powerful max moves. There are also Gigantamax forms. Certain Pokemon with the Gigantamax factor can change their appearance when they Dynamax, giving them a new max move. For example, when an Alchemy Gigantamaxes, it gets G-Max Finale instead of Max Starfall, allowing it to heal itself and its teammates. Blimey, how many times did I say max in that explanation? I think Dynamax is a solid improvement from Megas and Z moves, but some flaws do need to be addressed. First of all, like Z moves, it doesn't quite have the same cool factor as Megas. Quite the opposite actually, as Dynamax is unavoidably very, very goofy. Don't get me wrong, I love that, but a Pokemon getting kaiju size can't really compete with it getting a flashy, cool new form. The Gigantamax forms mitigate this a bit, but they don't hit the same as Megas, and they don't really solve the problem that, for most Pokemon, they're just going to be getting bigger. This is a big sticking point for a lot of people, and I can see why. The animations are much shorter than the Z-move animations, but they still drag on for a bit, and the move animations, like Z-moves, leave a lot to be desired. This is once again a consequence of them being one size fits all, but they're still kinda boring, and no amount of switch vibrations can distract from that. Dynamax also has less narrative source than Z-moves or Megas. The spectacle of Dynamax works well for Galar's big, loud sports arena battles, sure, but the concept of Dynamax doesn't really work itself into the core themes of the story. For being such a centralizing part of battles in Gen 8, it feels weirdly divorced from the Galar region as a whole, max raid battles aside. I mean, you literally get the Dynamax band when a wishing star falls out of the sky in front of you. There had to have been a better way to tie this central gimmick into the plot. Dynamax has many presentational issues, and it arrived at an unfortunate time that we won't get into. But I think it did a great job at fixing many of the issues that Megas and Z-moves had. First, any Pokemon on your team can Dynamax, no item required. This is massive. It makes Dynamax as a gimmick so much more accessible and flexible. Now, instead of your entire strategy hinging on one Pokemon that's holding one item, and hoping the stars align so you can actually use it, you can adapt your strategies around your opponent's team. I'm speaking from experience here. Back in the days of Sword and Shield, I built a team around Gigantamax Alchemy that did really well. The team was focused on an Alchemy Obstagoon Poltegeist core, with Alchemy in its base form using Decorate on either Obstagoon or Poltegeist so they could hit back with extra strong facades or stored powers, and if things went hairy, Alchemy could heal them with GMAX Finale. But if that strategy didn't work out, I could always have another member of my team Dynamax instead, and could even leave Alchemy out entirely if my other team members were more useful. Max moves are also an improvement over Z moves in many ways. For one, you get 3 turns of max moves rather than the 1 of Z moves, so Dynamaxing feels like it makes more of an impact. But the moves generally aren't too overpowered, hitting that balance between satisfying but fair. The additional effects each max move has also help you get more up the 3 turns of Dynamax. You can set up terrain, weather, buffs or debuffs that last well past your Dynamax window, potentially facilitating all sorts of great strategies and completely reshaping the playing field, balanced out by the fact your opponent can do the same. This also means that timing your Dynamax properly is essential, giving the feature a deceptively high skill ceiling. Presentation issues aside, Dynamax shows us that removing the necessity of a held item can go a long way in making a new feature more appealing. The ability of max moves to change the playing field gives you the satisfaction of a powerful attack, while ensuring the satisfaction of the gimmick goes further and lasts longer. However, those presentational issues are still pretty important. No matter how mechanically sound a gimmick is, if it isn't cool or interesting, it won't capture imaginations. Following on from that, we have...
It was his hat, Mr. Krabs! He was #1!
Woof, clunky name. But let's look at what the Terastal phenomenon has to offer us. In Gen 9, every Pokemon has a Terra type in addition to its regular type. Once per battle, you can Terastalize any Pokemon on your team, changing its type to its Terra type. The Terastalized Pokemon gains the defensive traits of its Terra type, and a same type attack bonus on both its Terra type and its original types. If the Pokemon's Terra type is the same as one of its original types, it gains an extra boost to its moves. So from the Lowland Persian that Terastalizes into a Poison type, would gain a 1.5 times boost to its Dark and Poison type moves, but in a Lowland Persian that Terastalizes into a Dark type, gain a 2 times boost to its Dark moves. Like Mega Evolution, this effect lasts for the whole battle. A conceptually simple gimmick, but one that opens up a lot of creative possibilities. Like Dynamax, it's a universal gimmick, and has offensive and defensive applications. You can Terastalize to power up your moves, and or to remove weaknesses, giving you plenty of flexibility. Terastalization can be a big help for Pokemon with poor defensive typings, or Pokemon with strong moves that wouldn't otherwise get stabbed. It can help turn the tables on an otherwise unfortunate situation. It's easy to understand but takes a lot of skill to use effectively, which I think is exactly what you need from a battle gimmick. This section is shorter than the others, but that's because there isn't too much to say. It's a mechanically sound gimmick that makes battles feel fresh and exciting. However, much like Dynamax, Terastal Phenomenon does have some presentational issues. First among them being that awful name. Terastal? Yuck. It's awkward to say and doesn't really communicate anything about the gimmick. Also like Dynamax, the crystal hats are quite silly. which again, I'm a fan of, but remember that Megas are so well loved because of the rule of cool, and have been practically unparalleled in that regard since their inception. And moves boosted by the Terastal phenomenon don't feel particularly special. Even if we know there are some boosts under the hood, the effects don't sell that, making for an unsatisfying visual spectacle. Changing types also isn't particularly exciting conceptually if you aren't dialed into the competitive scene, and a lot of people aren't. The Terastal phenomenon also suffers narratively like Dynamax, despite being thematically tied to the idea of treasure that permeates Scarvi's story, and despite the concept of change being a rich narrative vein that could have been explored. As much as I loved Paldea's plot, it once again felt like the primary gimmick was completely separate from the journey you go on as a trainer. Z-moves did this so right years ago, and I spent so much time in this video being mean to Z-moves. Another problem with terastalization is that to change your Pokemon's Terra type, you have to collect 50 Terra shards of the type you want to change it to. You can get shards from doing Terra Raid battles, and in the DLC, but before the DLC drop this was a massive pain, and a very grindy way to have to engage with an otherwise really solid battle gimmick. So there we have the last of the battle gimmicks, for now. At this point you can tell that Game Freak has learned lessons from previous gimmicks, and we can use these lessons when coming up with our own. Accessibility and flexibility are once again essential, with options to play offensively or defensively. You can also learn from the Terastal phenomenon's shortcomings. It's lacking a lot of oomph to make the boosted moves feel really satisfying. It's lacking the narrative integration that makes battle gimmicks truly memorable, and good lord, that name. We need something that rolls off the tongue better.
I'm gonna do my own thing.
Okay, I think we now have a solid base to build a decent gimmick on. We're looking for something that every Pokemon can use, and use well in many different ways. We want the changes to feel substantial, and the excitement it creates to last a while. We also want it to tie nicely into the story we're telling with the Pyara region, and I think we need to bring back some of the cool factor that hasn't been in these gimmicks since Megas, and we need to make our battle gimmick have that particular tokusatsu energy. While researching for this video, I also wanted to look at how other RPGs handle the concept of temporary powered up states. A lot of these games, like DQ11's Pep mechanic or Final Fantasy IX's Trance mechanic, grant different boosts to different party members based on their role and unique skill sets. Obviously the number of potential party members in Pokemon is far, far larger than those games, so we can't exactly come up with a bespoke boost for every Pokemon, but maybe there is something we can use instead. Types. Although there are enough Pokemon that buck the typical trends of their types, each type is designed to perform a specific role, and maybe a new battle gimmick can confer a type-specific boost. But how? Well, we've got gimmicks that change stats, moves, and types. What other parts of a Pokemon serve to give a Pokemon its identity? I can think of a big one. Abilities. A good ability can often be the deciding factor in whether a Pokemon is consigned to obscurity or becomes a new darling of competitive. And maybe a gimmick that adds a temporary second ability on top of the one a Pokemon already has could provide that satisfying status quo shift we've been looking for. Looks like it's about time to welcome back the people who skipped the deep dive. Remember, you're much cooler than them. Welcome back, those of you who skipped the explanation. Don't worry, I like you just as much as the people who watched all the way through. I'm just happy you're here. Okay, without further ado, here's my idea for the Pyara region's battle gimmick. The Star Rise phenomenon. Once per battle, a trainer with the Star Rise band can draw strength from the stars above and connect with the hopes and dreams of one of their Pokemon, granting them the power to turn the tables in battle. Try to capture a little bit of that tokusatsu magic that the Mega Ring and Z-Ring had with the Star Rise band, mostly by giving it a little toy tick function and a corresponding transformation pose. Star Rising lasts 3 turns, boosting the base power of all of a Pokemon's moves, and granting it a new ability based on its Star Rise type. This defaults to a Pokemon's primary type, but can be changed in an in-game facility for a small cost. But that's not all. If a Pokemon has a Star Rise factor, when it Star Rises, it can change into a special Star Rise form. These forms get unique abilities, and reshuffle the Pokemon's base stats, while keeping the base stat total the same. But what does a Star Rise form look like? Well, if Mega Evolutions are more, and Gigantamax forms are bigger, the keyword for Star Rise forms is beyond. You're using the bond with your Pokemon to let them achieve things beyond their physical limitations, so for these forms I tried to add an element of reinterpretation, taking a core element of the base Pokemon's design and changing it to be something new that nevertheless preserved the original's vibes. Let's have a look at some Star Rise forms of familiar faces to show what I mean. Starting with, who else? The big cheese of the franchise. Here's Star Rise Pikachu. I chose to reinterpret Pikachu's cheeks here as the Den Den Daiko drums of the Japanese thunder god Raijin, with the classic lightning bolt shape being used as horns/eyebrows. Pikachu's wish is for stronger electric powers, so its Starrise form making it a god of thunder felt appropriate. Here's another big mascot. This is Starrise Eevee. This form takes Eevee's iconic floofs and turns them into multiple kitsune tails, resembling strands of DNA. Eevee's wish is to achieve its full potential, so this form activates its unstable genes and gives it the power of all of its evolutions. Next up is Starrise Meowth. It becomes a Fukusuke, a good luck symbol much like the Maneki Neko that base Meowth is based on. Meowth's tail becomes the doll's top knot, and its head coin becomes much larger to form the pillow the doll rests on. Meowth's wish is for wealth and fortune, and this form makes it into a fount of good luck. Just being around Starrise Meowth is enough to make you luckier. Right, that's enough Kanto pandering. Let's give some Pyara Starrise forms. Of course the starters deserve some special treatment, so here's Starrise Maestrantis, Starrise Caprapati, and Starrise Calamati. Starrise Maestrantis reinterprets the violin bow claws of its base form as a conductor's baton, with the design changing to look more like a conductor's outfit. Its wish is to make more music, and after Starrising it can make grand symphonies just by flicking its wrist, and even psychically compel anyone who hears its songs to join in. Starrise Caprapati's wish is to make more food to share with its friends, and its chef's hat has been reworked into a big pot of soup that can burn enemies and heal allies alike. It's also on all fours now, which will make a particularly vocal contingent of the Pokemon fandom happy, I'm sure. Starrise Calamati's wish is for its art to affect those around it more powerfully, and it does so by literally becoming one with its art. Its tentacles are reworked into a canvas and frame, which it fills in with its ink to form mesmerizing patterns. Some say that staring too deeply into the art on Starrise Calamati's canvas can make you lose your sense of self, as you're overcome by its artistic expression. That's all for this episode. The questions for today's episode are: what's your favourite battle gimmick so far, and what are your guesses for Gen 10's battle gimmick? Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time, where we'll finally be getting into some of the human characters that call Pyara home. Got more Starrise forms on the way too.
Bomb!